This pie chart was made from statistics from the Auditor General's report, November 1993. In November 1993, our national debt stood at $423 billion. This chart goes all the way back to 1867, and during that period of time, the amount of money that was borrowed for real spending on goods and services by our government amounted to no more than $37 billion. Yet here, in 1993, the interest paid over all those years amounts to $386 billion for only having borrowed that $37 billion through all those years. Now, the bulk of this interest, of course, comes as a result of us stopped using the Bank of Canada in 1973, 74, whenever it was, and borrowing wholeheartedly from private banks. Why are we paying out this amount of interest, and to whom? Yeah. But this helps you to see the picture, what the money scam is doing to us collectively.
It was about 5 or 6 weeks ago that Victoria spoke to a group of 600 people at a Rotary Club, and she's going to be giving the same speech to us today. And I saw it, I think a week or so after it hit the web, it started going around, and so I quickly got on the phone and talked with her dad Zane and invited them here. And so we have a very special treat. So Victoria, come on up, do your thing.
Have you ever wondered why Canada is in debt? Have you ever wondered why the government forces Canadians to pay so many taxes? Have you ever wondered why the bankers from the largest private banks are becoming wealthier and the rest of us are not? Have you ever wondered why the gross national debt is over $800 billion? Or why we are spending $160 million a day on the interest of the national debt? That's $60 billion a year. Have you ever wondered who receives the $60 billion? What I have discovered is the banks and the government have colluded to financially enslave the people of Canada. I will share with you 3 important points of reference which will hopefully spark enough interest and concern for you to continue the research on your own and to engage your government to stop this criminal act against the people of Canada. First, we will briefly examine the Bank of Canada. Second, we will see how our banking system works today. And lastly, I will offer a viable solution that we can petition our government to implement. A very little known figure in Canadian history is J.L. Gradon McGeer. He was a lawyer, Member of Parliament, and Mayor of Vancouver. His contribution to Canada is probably the greatest in our history. He championed the creation of the National Bank of Canada, whose sole purpose is to create and manage Canada's money. It was formed on July 3, 1934, and owned by all Canadians. Until the 1970s, because of the Bank of Canada, Canada's national debt was held at a constant, manageable level, until the government decided to implement what we now have as our modern-day banking system that is robbing the Canadian people. So how are they robbing us? Allow me to explain how our private banks and government work today. First, the Canadian government borrows money from the private banks. They then lend the debt-based money to Canada with compounded interest. The government then continues to increase taxation of Canadians year after year in order to pay back the interest on the exponentially growing national debt. What results is inflation, less real money for Canadians to spend into our economy, and the real money being used to pad the pockets of the banks. Also, the government gave the banks the ability to loan out money that doesn't exist in the form of loans. When a bank gives you a mortgage, which literally means a death pledge, or a loan, they don't actually give you money. They click a key on a computer and generate the fake money out of thin air. They don't actually have it in their bank vaults. Presently, the banks only have $4 billion on reserve, but they have loaned out over $1.5 trillion. To quote Graham Towers, each and every time a bank makes a loan, a new bank credit is created. New deposits, brand new money. Broadly speaking, all new money comes out of a bank in the form of loans. As loans are debt, then under the present system, all money is debt. What I find interesting is even Jesus in Matthew 21 drove out the money changers in the temple because they were manipulating the currency to steal money from the people. The private banks are just like the money changers in Matthew 21. They are defrauding and robbing the people of Canada, thus their freedom, and they need to be stopped. How should the banking system work? In an infamous interview, Mr. McGeer asked Mr. Towers, "Can you tell me why a government with power to create money should give that power away to a private monopoly and then borrow that which Parliament can create itself back at interest to the point of national bankruptcy?" Mr. Towers replied, "If Parliament wants to change the form of operating the banking system, then certainly that is within the powers of Parliament. In other words, if the Canadian government needs money, they can borrow it directly from the Bank of Canada. The people would then pay fair taxes to repay the Bank of Canada. This tax money would in turn get injected back into our economic infrastructure and the debt would be wiped out. Canadians would again prosper with real money as the foundation of our economic structure and not debt money. Regarding the debt money owed to the private banks, such as the Royal Bank, we would simply have the Bank of Canada print the money owing, hand it over to the private banks, and then clear the debt with the Bank of Canada. And yes, we have the power and lawful right to do so. In conclusion, it has become painfully obvious, even for me, a 12-year-old Canadian, that we are being defrauded and robbed by the banking system and a complicit government. What will we do to stop this crime? What will we do to ensure that the next generation will live free and clear of the debt-based economy that enslaves them to the banks? Margaret Mead said the following, and I hope that all of you remember this. "Never doubt that a small group of people can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has." Thank you.
Hello, my AMI friends. Will Abram here, greeting you from my home in beautiful Maple Bay on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I want to express my sincere joy about what I see coming into this world today. I see a new generation of great young thinkers, and they are speaking out. They know a better world is possible. I'm so pleased to have 12-year-old Victoria Grant and her parents on board with me here. Victoria knows what the Bank of Canada was intended to do and what it did do for a period of 35 years in Canada. Victoria knows that when we, the people, print the money as needed to build schools, to build roads, to build hospitals, daycare centers, whatever, everyone works, wealth appears, and the nation thrives. 12-year-old Victoria Grant expresses herself very clearly with well-chosen words. She looks for truth, and honestly, in our history books, we need to find real truth. The great American historian Howard Zinn, author of the book The People's History of the United States, expressed it very well. He said, "If you don't know your history, it's as if you were born yesterday. Those guys will tell you anything, and you will believe them. Those guys will not get away with false stories like babies in the incubator or weapons of mass destruction. They will be seriously questioned by this new generation of young people." My U.S. hero today is Dennis Kucinich and his needs bill, H.R. 2990. It is very timely. Bill 2990 is very much a copy of what we put in our 1934 Bank of Canada Act. Gerald McGeer is my hero of that particular time. He's my Canadian hero. He was a wise, well-spoken man. His efforts helped create, in 1935, the Canadian Central Bank of Canada. McGeer became a prominent member of the Canadian government that year, and how lucky that was for us that he did. In 1938, McGeer was instrumental in nationalizing our central bank. 100,000 shares were placed in the hands of the people. The Bank of Canada became our very own bank, in our hands. Private shareholders were bought out. The bank belonged to us, the people. I now wish to briefly recap our Canadian history of that time as it relates to the performance of the Bank of Canada. It is a story that must be told worldwide. I want people all over the world to grasp it and understand that money is something that only we, the people, create when we work. We printed legal currency, but only to the amount that was needed. We put every man, woman, and child capable of working to work, producing real, visible, social, national wealth. As an 84-year-old man, I lived through that history. So here we go with a brief date-by-date history of Canada as it grew from 1934 with the use of the Bank of Canada, making very good use of it. I start with the global crash of October 1929. October 1929, the great crash, as you've all heard. Bank loans are called in. Properties are foreclosed on. The Depression begins. October 1930, R.B. Bennett is elected Prime Minister of Canada. R.B. Bennett had little sense of social economics. Bank loans were still called in. Money in circulation decreases. 1931, Canada. Lord Macmillan Commission was sent out from Great Britain to tell us how to get out of the Depression. Bankers and their economic cronies were the ones who came here. Their advice was, and it sounds good, you need a central bank. Gerald Grattan McGeer comes to the rescue. McGeer was a grade 8 high school dropout. He became a worker with International Iron Molders and then became a union leader. He was a tall man, very bright, knew that he needed more education to get political power and attention. He took his matriculation in 6 months, then went to Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, to the law school there. He became a brilliant, social-minded lawyer. He spent 1931 mastering the intricacies of banking. McGeer corresponded with great economists like John Maynard Keynes, John Kenneth Galbraith. He studied the island of Guernsey experience, and he certainly looked through the American history of the Abraham Lincoln time and the Greenbacks. Canada, 1931, the per capita of money in circulation. It fell from $34 per person to $4.97 per person. That was too few dollars out there for public trading. I have a quote here from a 1931 pamphlet entitled Bank of Canada, Why Not? It comes from Arthur Meehan, the Right Honourable Arthur Meehan, who was Prime Minister of Canada in the early 20s and also briefly in 1926. In an address before the Bankers Educational Association in Toronto on January the 21st, 1931, on a matter of, quote, inadequacy of currency, if people were in a position to exchange what they have too much of, we would see that there was not too much of anything. The trouble is that they are not in a position so to exchange. It was conceded that conditions had progressed from bad to worse to furnish grounds for an inquiry into the causes that prevent us from obtaining a sufficiency of medium in circulation for exchange of goods and services. Statistics Canada, Canada Yearbook, 1931. These are the figures that I have here. Per capita of working capital estimated on a population of 10 million people as of April 30, 1931, was $34 per capita. The quota as represented by the national state currency only went down to $21 per person. The per capita of state currency, deducting the gold coinage, brought it down to $14 per person circulated. And then the per capita of state currency, if we deducted the $50,000 paper bills, it ended up that the per capita in circulation for the ordinary people amounted to no more than $4.97. $4.97 per person. Too little money circulating to make the economy work. Canada, 1934. McGeer was invited to Ottawa to address the Banking Commons Committee. He addressed this committee for 5 hours as if they were a bunch of uninformed freshmen. They had no response. They had no argument back to McGeer's reasoning. And that is a quote from Maclean's Magazine, 1945. McGeer had become quite popular because of his outspoken abilities as a lawyer and as a monetarist. Canada, 1934, he ran for the mayor of Vancouver, British Columbia, and he was elected by a landslide. On July the 3rd, 1934, in Canada, Bank of Canada Act received royal assent. It became law with the exclusive right to create the nation's credit and currency, but it was still a central bank, still owned by the non-wealth producing shareholders. McGeer that year, Canada 1935, he published his book called The Conquest of Poverty. It is a book worth reading. It is a book that you will not find in any library in Canada, and I would no doubt say likewise in the United States. Canada 1935. Prime Minister R.B. Bennett loses the federal election. Gerald Grattan McGeer, Mayor of Vancouver, ran for the Liberal Party. He was elected as a Member of Parliament under the new Prime Minister, William Lyon Mackenzie King. William Lyon Mackenzie King was a monetarily much wiser leader. Canada, 1935. Mayor Jerry McGeer begins to put people to work by building a new city hall for the city of Vancouver. The Depression has begun to wane, but there were still thousands of men unemployed, and this was an incredibly difficult year for Gerald McGeer in Canada, in Vancouver, with tens of thousands of people still unemployed. Canada, 1935. The Central Bank of Canada was built. It opened its doors on March the 11th and begins printing money to pay farmers for employing workers in the harvest or to work on other community projects. At that time, I know my dad was getting $20 a month to work on a country road with a horse-drawn hand scraper. And there were other tasks like that that were paid for by the Bank of Canada. Canada, 1938. Bill 143, House of Commons of Canada, an act to assist municipalities in making self-liquidating improvements. That helped municipalities to begin to put people to work. In 1938, McGeer was instrumental in nationalizing our central bank. 100,000 shares were placed in the hands of the people. The Bank of Canada became our very own bank in our hands. Private shareholders were bought out. The bank belonged to us, the people. Canada, 1939. You all know what happened then. The war begins. The Second World War. Clarence Decatur Howe was appointed to be Minister of Munitions and Supplies. These are the words of C.D. Howe. We have no idea of cost, but before the war is over, everything will be needed. So let us go ahead anyway. If we lose the war, nothing will matter. If we win the war, the cost will still have been of no consequence, and soon will be forgotten. Now that's a rather interesting statement, because it was of no consequence. We won the war, we spent billions of dollars, and we never went into debt. So it was soon forgotten. Canada, 1939 to 1946. World War II. We printed billions of dollars as needed. Overnight, we put every person in Canada to work in one way or another. We sent 1 million of our best workers overseas, clothed them, fed them, housed them. We built 28 crown corporations for large-scale production of goods. We built the third largest navy in the world during that short period of time. We built more guns than any other country in the British Empire. We printed and spent billions of dollars into the war effort, yet no national debt accumulated. We continued this system of money for the next 25 years, created a great nation. We were known worldwide as a nation of peacekeepers. I am a beneficiary of that era in a number of ways. Land grants for free university was given to veterans who chose so. Family allowance checks were brought in for families with children. Old age pensions at age 65 for everyone. Free universal Medicare for all Canadians, and many other benefits for the social well-being of Canada. So in Canada we had everyone working, and we created a great nation. And here I'd like to quote Aristotle, 335 BC. Money exists not by nature but by law. We in Canada created our own currency by law, known as legal tender, using our nationalized bank. We can bring all that back overnight. The laws still exist. Bright young people coming along are learning of that, and they are asking good hard questions. Our message is getting out, and I want to say thank you to all of you and the internet for what is happening in the world today. We are a global family. There is no need for poverty in this world if run by the God-given intelligence and the understanding that we are indeed an interconnected global family. We are moving right now into a higher state of consciousness. Thanks to all who are here today for the work and the educating that you are doing. And thanks to the many others not here who are also tuning in. The love of money indeed is the root of all evil. We can and will replace it with the love of money for the good of all people. I'd like to introduce Victoria Grant to you here at this point. I welcome you, Victoria. to this Chicago conference of international speakers on the DVD along with me. Thank you for the inspiration, the joy, and the hope that you have given me, especially at this time in my life. Now, I would like to say in conclusion, money, like water that nourishes the earth, should flow to nourish every person and keep healthy the whole of mankind. Money indeed is the lifeblood of communal living. It must flow equally from one human being to another, satisfying the needs of each so that each may live, create, and satisfy the needs of others. Unfortunately, mankind has not sufficiently morally evolved to understand our global human interconnectedness. The ability to manipulate money for selfish reasons by some, coupled with the helplessness and unquestioning acceptance of too many others, leads to a great imbalance in the overall health of our planet and our civilization. This imbalance is the root cause of violence in homes and wars in the nations. Money has put man out of step with nature. Water does not defy the laws of gravity. It recycles according to the laws of nature and keeps being purified. Money is still controlled by men who have not evolved beyond the stage of choosing greed and selfishness. Superior intelligence and wisdom and moral integrity is seldom seen by those whom we elect to govern us. This must change soon, for civilization is on a collision course with the laws of nature. Greed and the love of money is destroying the air we breathe, the water we drink, and even the soil from which we grow our foods. We must very soon, with intelligence, coupled by compassion and sharing, pull up our socks or we perish. It is my hope that this booklet that I'm reading from will in some way help give insights into how money must flow evenly by a people-led governance to fill the basic needs of every person on earth. Now, I want to emphasize the power of community. We are a global community, we are a national community, and here in Canada, our national community used money as an intellectual tool for expanding the bartering system. We must take back that tool and put it back into the hands of the people. And once we do, we'll put everyone to work, and the creative abilities of every human being will rise to the top without being restricted for want of money. I thank you for listening. This is Will Abram from beautiful Maple Bay on Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I wish I were there with you, but unfortunately I cannot be, so this is the next best thing. Thank you for hearing me out.